The clause number 6.1.3. The title is Compliance Obligation. It means legal requirements and other requirements. Compliance obligation means legal requirements and other requirements. Legal requirements means like acts and rules imposed by the regulatory authority and government bodies. Other requirements means commitment to interested parties, including customers. ISO 14001, Clause 6.1.3. The title is Compliance Obligation. ISO 45001, Clause 6.1.3. The title is Legal and Other Requirements. The titles appear different, but the requirements are similar in the clause. Clause 6.1.3 is part of the planning activity under PDCA cycle. Clause 9.1.2 is part of the checking activity under PDCA cycle. This Clause 9.1.2 is the evaluation of the Clause 6.13. ISO 14001, Clause 9.1.2. The title is Evaluation of Compliance. ISO 45001, Clause 9.1.2. The title is Evaluation of Legal and Other Requirements. The definition of evaluation is a process of comparison of the actual value with the required value. Let us understand the difference between two clauses, 6.1.3 and 9.1.2. Clause 6.1.3 is part of the planning activity under PDCA cycle. Clause 9.1.2 is part of the monitoring and measurement activity, which is the checking phase under the PDCA cycle. Clause 6.1.3 deals with the mechanism to identify the applicable legal obligations. Clause 9.1.2 deals with the mechanism to evaluate the applicable legal obligations. For example, if the auditee is not aware of what legal obligations are applicable, for example, the Water Pollution Act and rules that apply to the workplace or business, the deviation should be addressed under Clause 6.1.3. If the auditee is aware of the applicable legal obligations, but is not aware of any amendments to those legal obligations that apply to the workplace or business, for example, the COD must be less than 100 milligrams per liter, the deviation should be addressed under Clause 6.1.3. If the auditee is aware of the applicable legal obligations, including any amendments, but the documentation of the applicable legal obligations has not been prepared, the deviation should be addressed under Clause 6.1.3. This document is called a legal register or register of regulations. If the auditee has not prepared a monitoring and measurement plan to ensure compliance with the applicable legal obligations, for example, the quality of treated water is checked except for the COD value, the deviation should be addressed under Clause 9.1.2. If the auditee has prepared a monitoring and measurement plan to ensure compliance with the applicable legal obligations, but the frequency of monitoring and measurement activities does not align with the applicable legal obligations. For example, the COD value is required to be checked daily according to the legal obligation, but the COD value is only measured once a week. The deviation should be addressed under Clause 9.1.2. If the auditee has prepared a monitoring and measurement plan to ensure compliance with the applicable legal obligations, including the frequency of monitoring and measurement activities, but the monitoring and measurement activities are not carried out according to the planned activities, the deviation should be addressed under Clause 9.1.2. Clause 6.1.3 from ISO 14001 and ISO 45001 requires, first, identifying the applicable rules and legal obligations. Second, integrate them into the business process. Third, prepare documentation of the applicable legal obligations. Clause 9.1.2 from ISO 14001 and ISO 45001 requires, first, preparing an EHS monitoring and measurement plan. Second, set the frequency and alignment with legal obligations. Third, implement the EHS monitoring and measurement activities. Legal obligations may include any of the following: First, approval compliance. Second, submission compliance. Third, monitoring compliance. Fourth, informative compliance. Fifth, miscellaneous compliance. What is the approval type of compliance? Under legal obligations, it is mandatory to obtain approval from the regulatory authority. The approval is valid for a specific period, and renewal is required when the approval expires. Such approval may be called a permit, consent, authorization, NOC, certificate, or license. If you can prepare a comprehensive list of compliance obligations under approval, the evaluation becomes easier. Now, submission. What is the submission type of compliance? Under legal obligations, it is mandatory to submit various data, reports, or information to the regulatory authority on a regular basis. We need to submit safety audit compliance once every 2 years. We need to submit environmental audit compliance once a year. We need to submit operational data with environmental performance on a monthly basis. We need to submit hazardous waste disposal data on a quarterly basis. If you can prepare a comprehensive list of compliance obligations under submission, the evaluation becomes easy. Now, monitoring and measurement type of compliance. What is the monitoring and measurement type of compliance? Under legal obligations, it is mandatory to measure and monitor compliance data. We need to measure water consumption. We need to measure energy consumption. We need to monitor the quality of treated wastewater. We need to monitor the illumination survey. We need to monitor the noise survey. We need to monitor the earthing pit resistance. If you can prepare a comprehensive list of compliance obligations under monitoring and measurement, the evaluation becomes easy. Informative compliances, for example, don't mix biomedical waste with canteen waste for disposal purposes. It means that if both types of waste are mixed, it is a deviation. Compliance can be achieved without action, which means informational compliance. Miscellaneous compliance refers to those legal obligations that do not fit into any of these categories.